Hi, my name is Pamela Fuselli, and I'm the host of Popping the Bubble Wrap. Are you the person in your family who worries about the safety of others, about buying safety products and using them? Are you yelling, "Yes, that's me"? Then this is the podcast for you. Raising a child or children can be a hair-raising undertaking, and keeping them safe is your priority. Parachute's Popping the Bubble Wrap podcast explores what you really need to think about and provides easy tips on prevention strategies. No bubble wrap here, though. The holiday season is upon us once again. Wish lists in hand, you wander the toy aisles searching for the gifts that will bring a smile to your kids' faces. You might be thinking about safety, trying to assess which of the many options will be appropriate, but also fun. Maybe you have older children as well, or you're buying for family members. How do you buy for different ages? Why do age recommendations matter? What products and product parts should you watch out for? In today's episode, we'll answer these questions and more so you can feel confident shopping this holiday season. Joining us today for the conversation is parent Leslie Bangama and grandparent Dave Trafford, as well as our expert, Kirsten Werdenberg, Director of Pediatric Emergency Ultrasound Research and Quality Assurance at IWK Health Center. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Pam.
Thanks for having us.
I love that you've labeled me my job as grandparent. That's the best job in the world, Pam.
I'll
Everything
bet it
else
is.
I do. It's all good. Yes, it is.
Leslie and Dave, maybe you can start off by telling us about the kids in your lives. Dave, you said being a grandparent is the best job ever. So tell us about your grandkids.
Grandkids are ranging in age from 8 to 1, and it's really interesting when you start to talk about the gift selections and how they evolve with obviously as the kids get older and their interests evolve. We cover every aisle of the toy store at this stage of our lives.
So that's one of the challenges, is figuring out which toys for which age and what's changed from the year before.
Absolutely. And you know, what's interesting, though, is how often I find, and I don't know about Leslie, but, you know, as the kids grow older, the toy selection also represents a lot of their personality in terms of how they learn, how they're entertained, how they're engaged, their attention span, all of those sorts of things. And to me, that, you know, when you look in the eldest's bedroom, Piper is 8, and man, she's got all of these little tiny toys, and she's got stories to tell around them. The boys, on the other hand, they're all about Tonka trucks and diggers. So now, again, at a different stage in their life and their development. But it does really, for me as the grandparent and going out there, my first thought is, how does this kind of fit into that personality they've expressed and what it is they want to do creatively? So it's fun, but at the same time, it's a challenge.
I'll bet. Leslie, does that sound familiar with your kids? Tell us a little bit about the children in your life.
That sounds very familiar, Pam and Dave. So I have a 13-year-old son, a 9-year-old boy son, and a 5-year-old daughter. And their interests are all over the place. In our household, the toys get passed down. Then, of course, I would assume I applied that same thought with having a daughter, but I gave birth to the ultimate girly girl. So that brought in a whole new host of toys and how we shop for toys. So it's been interesting.
It sounds like it. So where do you go to find information? I mean, Dave, do your grandkids provide you with a list, or your kids provide you with some ideas, or do you watch the commercials and think, oh, that sounds like that would be interesting for one of them or the other?
Probably a little bit of column A and B and maybe some C, but I kind of go back to, how do I observe them entertaining themselves, and what's the learning and all of that, and what's the fun in it? And then, let's face it, mom and dad are more plugged into the what do they need and what do they want. And that really helps, especially we're in Toronto, the girls are in Nova Scotia. So how do we manage that in terms of making sure that we get the right thing at the right time in the right place and all those sorts of things as far as delivery is concerned? So those are kind of the considerations. But I would, say that the girls, particularly Piper and Marigold, 4 and 8, they're not quiet about telling me what they want. So they're quite happy to have me entertain their list.
Leslie, sounds like you could learn a little bit from Dave's experience.
I really could. I found with my oldest, we're heavily in the video game. So really, once the console's purchased, it's more about, these are the games that I like to play. And then I have to do my research to see, is it age appropriate? And then I feel like my 9-year-old, he's in between also video games, but still very much that imagination play. What Dave was mentioning with his granddaughter, like the smaller toys, and there's a story behind them. It's very much the same here in my household. And then my 5-year-old, it's all imagination play, dress up. Like, I don't know the difference between Halloween costumes and dress up in my house. So
a growing wardrobe sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a growing wardrobe of tutus. Piper picks out the tutu of the day. At one stage, I think there might have been, 15 in her closet, so she could go for 2 weeks and not wear the same one. So yes, that was all part of the play, and it was an important element of the imagination play, right?
I like that. The tutu of the day. I think I'm going to follow that philosophy. Kirsten, you're coming at this from both a parent and an expert perspective. You've got kids of your own, but then you also see, unfortunately, some of the injuries that happen when toys either go astray or they're not used the way they should be, or they are not used by the right age group. Tell us a bit about your world, and maybe talk a little bit about those age recommendations and why it's so important to pay attention to that.
Yeah. So I'm a pediatric emergency physician. So when I see kids from injuries, I become passionate about wanting to stop them, because I just don't want these injuries to happen from toys and different types of trauma. I'm also a parent, as you mentioned. I have a 12-year-old boy and a 7-year-old girl. And, they're both different. And I have to be cognizant that, there is a big age difference, but the toys that my son would like are likely not developmentally appropriate for my daughter. So I learn a lot, not only from my work, but also from being a parent. Mm-hmm. And I do think my kids probably call me a bit of a party pooper to their friends, just because, I would never have a trampoline in my backyard, and some other sort of fun things that are a bit more dangerous that I see kids from injuries from. I'm obviously not a fan of. Mm-hmm. But I do think often when I see kids from injuries that have injuries from toys, either from an ingestion or they've put it in a ear or a nose where it's not supposed to go, it becomes very clear to me that often they're not, the things that they have are not developmentally appropriate for them to have and be playing with. And not only just the toys, but also parts of the toys. So, for example, button batteries are in a lot of toys that kids have these days, and those are very dangerous. So I do a lot of education with families, but it is after the fact. So that's why I really want to bring more awareness to these injuries, because I really don't want to see kids with those injuries.
Right. And the age recommendations are to do a lot with those small parts. It's not because your child isn't smart enough to use toys or play with toys that are for older age groups. It's because of these small parts that are part of the maybe older age group toy range.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, because I think people will often think of the age range as is my child able to use these toys? Where, part of it is actually, is it safe for your children, outside of that age range to be using those toys? So I think it is important, especially when you have multiple children or grandchildren at home, to be aware that, there's like I said before, that something that might be safe for an older child isn't going to be safe for a younger child. So, should you be purchasing that toy for that older child, or, making sure you're keeping it away from the younger child, because developmentally it's going to be different for those kids. And I think that it's important to remember that there is a recommendation, for the safety, and that's probably what's most important.
Yeah, I think that's important for parents to know about that. That's why, the toys are labeled in that way. What are some common dangerous items? You mentioned button batteries. What are some other ones that you see in the emergency department that parents should be aware of?
Just like small parts from toys, just in general, like Legos. I've seen Monopoly pieces, game pieces. Those aren't necessarily as dangerous as the button batteries, but also magnets. So there's these small little toy magnets that kids have played with where multiple of them can link together, and then they can get, ingested and get caught in the bowel and cause damage to the bowel or the intestines. Also common last year, we saw a lot of these water beads, which are, these little kind of squishy products which can absorb water and fill in size and obstruct whatever they've been, if they've been ingested or put into an ear or nose, and they can increase in size, making them more difficult to remove. So those are kind of the ones, in addition to the button batteries, which are usually within the toys or other household products, that we really worry about.
Yeah, and things like magnets and even batteries are common, but the water beads are I think speaks to some of the newer products that are on the market that are not meant for kids, but are in their homes, and almost anything can be a toy. And so they're attracted to those types of products.
Yeah, they're fun to play with, right? So why would they not attract a child? And then sometimes they want to eat them or put them in, an ear or nose or something.
Right. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be back in a moment. Nearly 3 decades ago, Amazon set out to be Earth's most customer-centric company, where people can discover and purchase the widest possible selection of safe and authentic goods. As part of that mission, they obsess over earning and maintaining trust by ensuring that they provide a trustworthy shopping experience. Amazon is dedicated to helping you make informed choices and use your purchases safely. Visit www.amazon.ca/product safety and usage to explore expert tips, articles, and videos from our partners to ensure a secure shopping experience. So, Leslie, Dave, before the break, we were talking about some of the things that Kirsten sees that can seriously injure children that you may not have thought about. And in particular, Leslie, I know you had an experience with button batteries. Can you tell us a little bit about, what happened there? Because I think your story and your experience and your daughter's experience will highlight, how dangerous these products are and how they can have a lifelong impact.
Yeah, thanks, Pam. So my daughter in April of 2020 ingested a lithium coin battery, also known as a button battery. This battery ended up rupturing her esophagus, her aorta, her trachea, her carotid left artery. She suffered a stroke and she had bleeding in her brain. The fact that she's even alive is a miracle in itself. But I never would have thought that something as small and simple as a battery could do a complete 180 of our lives. So, because of all the damage that it caused, she had to eat with a G-tube, and the G-tube essentially is a feeding tube that goes directly into her stomach. And then there's a gravity bag. There's different types of bags, but different type of feed. But the gravity bag was the one where I would just pour her liquid food into, and that would go straight into her stomach while her esophagus was healing, because she had to get a few surgeries to get it esophagus expanded because there was a restriction from the battery rupture. So one of the things that I set out to do when this happened to her, once I got over the mom guilt of it all, was I want to educate parents about how to prevent this injury from happening to them, or worse, their child dying from an everyday household item that's found in everyday household items. So it's been a journey. I even produced a documentary about it just to help people, because it's quite a long story when you start going into the details of it. And there's the injury, and then there's the post-surgery, and then there's post-hospital life, and then there's life as we know it. So it's really heavy on my heart to raise awareness for child safety when it comes to button batteries, because this journey has connected me to parents in Australia, in the US, and how this injury is tracked, and just using our voices as parents. Some, their children have died. Some, their children will permanently have medical issues. So it's heavy on my heart to talk about and educate as many people as possible.
Well, thank you for sharing your experience, because I think many parents won't, look at a button battery or look at a product with a button battery in it and think that that could be dangerous and could be even, life-altering or life-ending. Kirsten, if we're talking about parents who might suspect, and you don't always know if your child has ingested a button battery or what they have ingested, but if they suspect that their child has ingested a button battery, what should they do?
They should go immediately to the emergency department for them to be assessed by a physician.
And I've heard that giving a small amount of honey on the way is a good idea as well.
Yes. I mean, another option too is to contact your local poison center, and they can give recommendations on that. But the idea is that the honey would help prevent any injury from the battery after it's ingested.
Okay, that's great. Dave, I guess over the years, toys have changed since I was growing up and getting toys. Batteries used to be much bigger, but there's also things in your house that are not maybe labeled as a toy that your grandkids like to play with, but that would have a button battery in it. What's been your experience with this issue?
Well, universally, every one of the 4 kids at a certain age made a beeline for the television remote. And I don't know about your house, but we've probably got like 3 or 4 kicking around because we use the Fire Stick, and we've got the one for the cable and all that nonsense. And at every point, they start to fiddle with it, and they're opening them up. Now, at some point, the battery, as you point out, may be too big to swallow, but at some point, there's also the remotes that have the button batteries inside them. So it's not really in the toy box, and right. It's not something that we have intended for them to be a toy, but they are certainly attracted to it. And now we've got to a point where we've got a bunch of old remotes. We've just taken all the batteries out of it, and we put it in the toy box, and they like to play with it. And whether it's a remote or a telephone or however they're mimicking our behavior, they're carrying on. But our elder grandson, he got to a point where he took it out of the toy box and said, "Papa, there's something wrong with this. There's no battery in it." So he wanted it to make noise. He wanted it to light up. And, at that stage, I think it became apparent to us that, we're getting the toys that have all the fun and the noise and the lights thing, all those things happen. You need the batteries in them. So we started to look and say, how does that light come on? Where is that battery? How does that noise happen? And how secure is the toy? So, I know back to the whole question around age appropriate and the labels that we put on there. And I'll ask, if I may, Kirsten and Leslie, the whole idea around saying this is age appropriate. And I know in some cases they will say, 3 and up, and it will have in very small print, small parts. And it doesn't occur to, me, maybe I'm online and I don't see that. So where do we need to kind of draw the line, for the doctor in the room and say, yes, you're being the killjoy because you're not allowing the trampoline in the backyard. But at the same time, when is it on the retailer or the toy manufacturer to say, this is not appropriate for anybody under the age of 5 because this is a danger to your life? And I don't want to label it like a cigarette box, But you know what I'm saying? It's at some point, it can't just be me. And I realize I have a responsibility, but doesn't it cut both ways?
I think that's an excellent point, Dave. I agree with you. I think, as Leslie mentioned before, it's really important for us to have data to inform these changes. And so I think as we are able to collect more information, and hopefully not in a long period of time, but, just some important information, about number of children that are injured and what are their injuries like, we can inform these manufacturers of these toys and say, look, like, this is really important for us to make sure that we're bringing more awareness to parents about the potential injuries. Because I think a lot of times, sometimes it comes with batteries included. You don't even know what type of battery is in it, and it comes out, or that, children's able to remove it, or, you put the battery in because you just want to turn it on because the kid's so excited for it. So you don't even think about those injuries. So you're right. I mean, I think there needs to be, those manufacturers, I think that is on their responsibility, especially given the magnitude of the types of injuries that we're seeing from them.
And I just wanted to add, as I have learned, Kristen, that because I live in Alberta, so I remember when I was trying to capture this data, I realized that how they currently track here, it's just my daughter was in for ingestion of a foreign object, but it wasn't itemized as to say, this is for a button battery, this is for water beads, and et cetera, magnet, what have you. So to what you're saying, that data needs to be more specific. So that way, the people who make the rules, the government, the what have you, can make the rules more finite. And then it also brings in, which is another question I would ask you, Dave, which is someone like me, and you have grandchildren of different ages. I have children ranging from 13 to 5. So I could buy the toy that says 8+ for my 9-year-old or my 13-year-old. And that's where the educational component, I think, comes in, which is, what we're doing right now, which is, okay, I've purchased this toy for my 2 older children, but I know my youngest and any children, which has a play date that these toys can't be around. So me gaining that knowledge, and then even not in putting the responsibility on my children, but them knowing, hey, listen, like, this stays in your room, or when you're done playing with this is something that you have to keep in your room, because when your sister has her friends here and I have 3, 4, 5-year-olds here, I don't want them to have access to this toy because it's not age appropriate for them, just based on the safety.
Well, you can have that conversation because the 12-year-old is at a stage where the 12-year-old understands that conversation. Here's what has happened in our house. The 4-year-old has the toy that is appropriate for him, but he's got a little brother who's, younger than 1 during the summer. And here's what I found myself saying. Don't give that to Elliot because it's got small parts and he will choke. The 4-year-old now is repeating that back to me. I can't give this to him because he will choke. So there's an educational component in there as well, right? Okay. And to make it even funnier is our 4-year-old granddaughter came home and she's obsessed with choking. And Erin, my daughter, her mom, couldn't figure out why was she so obsessed with choking. And I said, I'll tell you why. Because there are younger kids in the daycare. And I guarantee you, somebody said, don't give that to him because he'll choke on it. So there's a component there where, there's an age-appropriate toy, but there's also an age-appropriate conversation to have around that with the siblings in the room. And it didn't occur to me until I heard Erin relay the story about Marigold as the 4-year-old coming home saying, I could choke on that. Right.
That's great. And I think what you've pointed out is there's sort of these layers of protection, right? You want the manufacturers, that you can see on some toys now where they have little screws, which are also, at least those probably will just go right through them. But but little screws that you have to screw to undo the battery compartment, and then you've got supervision, but, parents are busy. Like, you cannot be 24/7 on. So you need that layer of protection for that product. But then you also have, the child itself, and, supervising them while they're playing with the toys or putting the toys away. So you've hit on a number of strategies that we can have, because in the end, we want our kids to be able to play with toys, to do whatever they like to do, whether that's Tonka trucks or dressing up or video games or all of that sort of thing. We want them to be able to do what they love to do, but we want to keep them safe, especially from these really serious injuries and maybe some hidden things that parents haven't thought about, like the button batteries and the small parts and the magnets. So thank you very much, all of you, Dave, Kirsten, Leslie, for joining us on the podcast today. I know we probably could talk about this for much longer, but there will be resources that we'll put in the show notes for the podcast for listeners to access if they have any additional information that they're looking for. So thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Pam.
Thanks, Pam.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode. Popping the Bubble Wrap is a podcast of Parachute, Canada's national injury prevention charity. We release episodes monthly. Visit us at parachute.ca and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Parachute Canada. Don't keep us a secret, though. Help other parents find this podcast by sharing the link to Popping the Bubble Wrap and taking a second to submit a review. It really does help. Popping the Bubble Wrap is produced by Story Studio Network.